If you ever hear a Disney cast member say Code H over the radio, run. Trust me, you'll want to get as far away from that area as possible. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Today, we're going to dive into some of the most bizarre and little-known facts about Walt Disney World, the so-called most magical place on Earth. But as you're about to find out, the magic has a lot of layers, and not all of them are as enchanting as you might think. Since it first opened its gates in 1971, Walt Disney World has built a reputation as the ultimate family destination. It's a place where dreams come true, where fantasy becomes reality, and where you're guaranteed to find joy around every corner. But like every good magic trick, the real intrigue lies in what happens behind the scenes. The careful choreography, the secrets, and yes, even the occasional mess-ups all contribute to the legacy of this iconic theme park. Let's start at the beginning, with an idea that transformed the entertainment landscape forever. In 1955, Walt Disney opened Disneyland in California, and it was a massive success. However, Disney quickly noticed a problem. The vast majority of visitors were coming from the western half of the United States. At the time, 75% of the US population lived east of the Mississippi River, but they weren't flocking to California. Disney knew that if he wanted to bring the magic to everyone, he'd have to build something bigger and better, somewhere close to these potential guests. This idea would eventually become Walt Disney World. But building a new park wasn't just about creating more attractions. It was about creating an entirely new world. A world that would need to be crafted with precision, secrecy, and a whole lot of land. In the mid-1960s, Walt Disney began what would come to be known as the Florida Project. He started buying up land in Central Florida, specifically around Bay Lake. But Disney didn't want to tip his hand too soon. To avoid attracting attention and driving up land prices, Disney used a series of dummy corporations to make these purchases. The Cloak and Dagger operation was so secretive that even his own employees didn't know what was going on. But rumors started to spread. Who was buying all of this land? People speculated it might be NASA, Ford, the Rockefellers, or even the reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes. Reporters were relentless in their pursuit of the truth, and Walt Disney was forced to deny any involvement. Unfortunately, Disney wasn't the best actor, and his denials only fueled the speculation. Finally, in 1965, Disney was ready to unveil his grand plan. With journalists breathing down his neck, he revealed the details of what he called the greatest attraction in the history of Florida. This was going to be more than just a theme park. It was going to be an entire world of its own, a place where the lines between reality and fantasy would blur in the most delightful ways. Sadly, Walt Disney didn't live to see his vision fully realized. On December the 15th, 1966, Disney passed away from lung cancer, leaving behind a dream that would have to be brought to life without him. His brother, Roy Disney, who had been planning to retire, made the decision to stay on and oversee the completion of Walt Disney World. And though Roy would also pass away just 3 months after the park's grand opening, the legacy of the Disney brothers lives on in every corner of the park. Now, let's talk about one of the most intriguing aspects of Disney World, the infamous tunnel network. You've probably heard about it. It's often said that there's a vast network of tunnels underneath the Magic Kingdom, allowing cast members to move from one area of the park to another without being seen by guests. It's a genius idea when you think about it. After all, you wouldn't want a cast member dressed as Mickey Mouse walking through Frontierland on their way to Tomorrowland, right? But here's the thing, those tunnels aren't actually underground. Florida has a high water table, which makes it nearly impossible to dig out basements or tunnels of any significant depth. So, what Disney did was create the tunnel network at ground level and build the Magic Kingdom on top of it. That's right, when you're strolling down Main Street, USA, you're actually on the second floor of the park. The ground beneath your feet is home to a world of hidden corridors, dressing rooms, and logistical operations that keep the magic running smoothly above. But Walt Disney's vision didn't stop at theme parks. One of his most ambitious projects was Epcot, which stands for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. Today, Epcot is one of the 4 main theme parks at Walt Disney World, known for its celebration of technology, innovation, and international culture. But what Epcot is now is a far cry from what Walt originally envisioned. Before there was the Epcot Center, there was Epcot, the city. Walt Disney didn't just want to build a park, he wanted to create a utopian community, a modernist and futurist city that would serve as a model for how people could live in harmony with technology and each other. This was to be a fully functional city, home to 20,000 residents, complete with a city center, residential areas, transportation systems, schools, and even a greenbelt. But here's the kicker. Residents wouldn't own the land or their homes. Instead, they'd live in a totalitarian company town where Disney had the final say on everything. The idea was that everyone would be employed by Disney, either at the Magic Kingdom or one of the other attractions, and there would be no retirement. Everyone had to work, and in return, they'd get to live in this so-called community of tomorrow. Walt Disney was passionate about his Epcot project, and according to his brother Roy, he was working on the plans even from his hospital bed just days before his passing. But after Walt's death, the Disney board wasn't as enthusiastic about the idea. The prospect of a totalitarian surveillance state where residents had no voting rights and no control over their own lives didn't sit well with the board members, or likely with the public. In some ways, the spirit of Walt's Epcot project lives on in the modern Epcot theme park, but it also found a home in a different project, Celebration Florida. Celebration was Disney's attempt to create a planned community that, while far from Walt's utopian vision, still carried some of the elements he had envisioned. The town, which was established around the year 2000, has its own set of unique rules and regulations, many of which reflect Disney's obsession with order and control. Today, Celebration is home to over 11,000 residents, and while it's a far cry from the futuristic city Walt had dreamed of, there are still hints of his influence in the way the town is run. For example, the town's aesthetic and architectural design are meticulously controlled, and the sense of community is emphasized at every turn. But just like the original Epcot concept, there's a certain level of control that's hard to ignore. Speaking of control, let's talk about Disney's obsession with maintaining the perfect appearance for its cast members. The integrity of the costumes worn by Disney's employees, or cast members as they're called, is something the company takes very seriously, perhaps too seriously. In order to ensure that there were no unsightly panty lines visible through costumes, Disney required cast members to wear regulation underwear. And as strange as that sounds, it gets even weirder. These undergarments were often shared between cast members as costumes were handed off between shifts. Yes, you heard that right, communal underwear. This practice continued until 2001, and while it's rumored that a scabies outbreak put an end to it, it's most likely that pressure from the workers' union was what finally caused Disney to abandon this bizarre policy. Now, let's take a lighter turn. Imagine this. Of all the Disney characters who might run for President of the United States, who would you pick? Mickey Mouse? Maybe Donald Duck? Well, in 1968, Disneyland staged a publicity stunt that involved none other than Winnie the Pooh running for president. Yes, that's right. The lovable, honey-obsessed bear from the 100-Acre Wood threw his hat into the ring. It was all in good fun, of course. A cute little one-off event meant to entertain guests. But Pooh wasn't done with his political aspirations. In 1972, he decided to run for president again, this time at Walt Disney World. The campaign included rallies, pamphlets, and a promise to put honey in every pot. As lighthearted as it was, it's a bit surreal to think of a character like Pooh entering the political arena, even as a joke. It's a charming piece of Disney history that reflects the company's unique blend of whimsy and clever marketing. But Disney World's brush with politics didn't stop with Pooh's presidential run. In 1973, amid the height of the Watergate scandal, President Richard Nixon held a press conference at Disney World's Contemporary Resort. The event was meant to be routine, but it quickly became historic when Nixon, in response to questions about his involvement in the scandal, famously declared, "I am not a crook." The phrase has since become one of the most iconic lines in American political history, and it all happened right in the middle of the most magical place on Earth. It's a strange juxtaposition, the serious, often dark world of politics set against the backdrop of a place designed to be an escape from reality. As if that was not enough, Disney World was also the site of another significant moment in pop culture history. On December the 29th, 1974, at Disney's Polynesian Village Resort, John Lennon officially signed the paperwork that disbanded the Beatles. Imagine that, a band that had defined a generation, whose music had changed the world, officially ending their journey at a resort surrounded by families and characters in costumes. It's a poignant reminder that even in a place designed to be timeless, real life still has a way of intruding. But Disney World isn't immune to tragedy either. Over the years, there have been several accidents and incidents that remind us that even in a place as carefully controlled as Disney World, things can go wrong. One of the most notorious cases involves River Country, Disney's first water park, which opened in 1976. The park was innovative for its time, featuring a rustic, natural setting that made it feel like an old-fashioned swimming hole. But River Country had a dark side. In 1980, an 11-year-old boy from New York tragically died after swimming in the park due to a brain infection caused by a microbe known as Naegleria fowleri. This brain-eating amoeba thrives in warm, fresh water, and while such infections are extremely rare, they are almost always fatal. The tragic incident cast a shadow over the park, and although Disney made changes to the water filtration system, River Country never fully recovered from the incident. In 2001, after years of declining attendance and mounting safety concerns, River Country closed for good. The park was left to rot, with its slides and pools slowly being reclaimed by nature. Today, the abandoned site is one of the creepiest places in all of Disney World, a stark reminder of the park's darker history. Another incident that rattled guests occurred in 1985 when a monorail car caught fire while traveling between Epcot and the Transportation and Ticket Center. The fire was caused by a short circuit, and the lack of emergency protocols and safety features were quickly exposed. Passengers were forced to kick out the windows and climb onto the roof of the monorail to escape the smoke and flames. Miraculously, no one was killed, but the incident led to widespread criticism of Disney's safety features, or lack thereof. In response, Disney upgraded the monorail system with better fire suppression and safety features, but the memory of that day still lingers for those who were there. In 1984, tragedy struck again when a small private plane crashed into the Epcot parking lot, killing 3 of the 5 people on board. The family had been flying over Disney World to take in the sights when they encountered mechanical trouble. The pilot attempted an emergency landing, but the plane went down before it could reach the runway. The incident was a sobering reminder that, no matter how much Disney World tries to control the environment within its gates, the outside world can still find a way in. Beyond the tragedies, there are other parts of Disney World that have faded into obscurity. Attractions and areas that, for one reason or another, have been left to the ravages of time. Take Discovery Island, for example. Originally known as Treasure Island, this small island in Bay Lake was once a thriving wildlife attraction, home to hundreds of exotic birds and other animals. It opened in 1974, just a few years after the Magic Kingdom, and for a time, it was a popular destination. But as Disney World continued to expand, Discovery Island was overshadowed by newer, bigger attractions, most notably Animal Kingdom, which opened in 1998. Faced with declining attendance and mounting costs, Disney decided to close Discovery Island in 1999. Today, the island remains abandoned, a haunting relic of Disney World's past. The structures are still there, slowly being overtaken by the lush Florida vegetation. It's a place few people have seen since it closed, and those who have visited describe it as both eerie and fascinating, a ghost town in the middle of the most magical place on Earth. Then there's River Country, which we've already discussed. After the park was closed, it was left to deteriorate, and in the years that followed, strange reports began to surface. According to some accounts, the park's closing theme music continued to play on a loop for years after it shut down, echoing through the empty, overgrown landscape. Lights would flicker on and off, seemingly at random, as if the park itself had a life of its own. These stories, combined with the park's already dark history, have made River Country one of the most infamous and unsettling places in all of Disney World. It's important to remember that Disney also has a playful side, one that sometimes goes a bit too far. In 1996, as part of the grand celebration for Disney World's 25th anniversary, Cinderella's castle underwent a dramatic and controversial makeover. The iconic castle was transformed into a giant pink birthday cake complete with oversized candles, candy decorations, and swirling icing made from inflatable materials. While some visitors found the transformation whimsical and festive, many others were less thrilled, especially couples who had planned on taking wedding photos in front of the classic castle. The garish pink castle, often compared to a towering piece of bubblegum or a Pepto-Bismol nightmare, left some guests feeling more nauseated than enchanted. Despite the mixed reactions, the Cake Castle remains one of the most memorable, if divisive, moments in Disney World's history. A bold reminder that even the most magical places sometimes take risks that don't land with everyone. Another example occurred in 2004. To celebrate the opening of Stitch's Great Escape, the mischievous alien decided to take over the iconic castle in true Stitch fashion. Overnight, the castle was covered in toilet paper and graffiti, with "Stitch is King" prominently scrawled across it. While it was meant to be a humorous publicity stunt, many guests were horrified to see their beloved castle desecrated. If there's one tip we could give to Disney's Imagineers for future publicity stunts, maybe don't mess with Cinderella's castle. Disney World is a place built on the idea of creating magic, of bringing joy and wonder to people of all ages. But there's a darker side to that magic, one that isn't always visible to the casual visitor. One of the most chilling examples of this occurred in 2016. Just hours before carrying out the horrific attack at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, the shooter, Omar Mateen, visited Disney Springs. According to investigators, Mateen had initially considered targeting Disney World, but ultimately chose Pulse because of its easier access and smaller scale. It's a disturbing thought, to say the least, that one of the deadliest mass shootings in US history could have happened at the most magical place on Earth. Then there's the phenomenon of guests attempting to scatter the ashes of their loved ones within the park. It might sound strange, but for some people, Disney World is such a significant part of their lives that they want it to be their final resting place. Of course, Disney has a strict policy against this, and whenever cast members suspect that someone is trying to scatter ashes, they enact a special code, Code A, which stands for ashes. The area is quickly cleaned, and the remains are disposed of. It's a far cry from the peaceful resting place that these fans might have imagined for their loved ones, but Disney's priority is maintaining the cleanliness and safety of the park for all guests. Speaking of codes, Disney has a whole slew of them, each designed to keep the magic intact without alarming guests. The wildest one of all? Code H. Try and follow us here. The H stands for honey. And which character famously loves honey? I'll give you a hint. He ran for president earlier. Winnie the Pooh, of course. Pooh. Yup. Code H means someone has had an accident. The kind no one wants to have. So, if you happen to overhear someone say Code H over the radio, watch your step. But there are other codes as well. Code U is used for incidents involving urination, whether it's a toddler who couldn't make it to the restroom in time, or an overly excited guest who just got a little too carried away by the magic. Then there's Code V, which signals a cleanup for vomit. Imagine all the dizzying rides, the swirling teacups, or maybe just too much cotton candy. It's no wonder this code gets called in more often than you might think. So there you have it. A glimpse behind the curtain at the most magical place on Earth. From its secret origins to its bizarre and sometimes dark history, Disney World is a place where fantasy and reality intertwine in ways that are both enchanting and unsettling. The next time you visit, remember that there's more to this magic than meets the eye. And if you ever hear someone mention a code H over the radio, well, you'll know what to do. If you enjoyed learning about the fascinating history of Walt Disney World, don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome Splash Travels content.